Hi, all. Good evening from my side. Good morning, probably for other people in other country. I'm Dennis Macchinetti, Senior Manager of Deloitte Consulting, MEVP on F&O Dynamics AX since 2014. And today we are discussing, we will discuss about test journey, so continuous update about F&O, and using the tool like RSAT. Before to move on the system, so to show something how we can use RSAT in our journey, a couple of slides, a couple of information about continuous update on Microsoft F&O. Probably all of you guys know what we are talking on, so we know the story behind, but I'd like to make a quick overview in terms of share the policy, the roadmap of Microsoft in terms of update. As you know, Microsoft release in terms of update a lot of update yearly, according or comparing with the previous release, where on-premise mainly, where update was very rare, so people, client have had the system version with all the update in place for many reasons, because update was at the end a project, a small project, but it was a project for a lot of rationale behind, like comparing, like technical stuff, like testing, like customization, and so on. So as of today, with F&O, Microsoft introduced one version update, like a service availability. So as you can see on the right, we have the number of update that Microsoft release is public information. So each month, more or less, we have an update. Each update have three main columns. One is PEAP availability, that is preview. It means that you need to sign up an agreement in order to join to the PEAP program. Is very this program have a lot of benefit for you, for the ecosystem of the partner and the client, because it allows us to have the release the version in advance before became general availability. We can test in advance a new feature. We can suggest also our idea using ideas portal. So join to the PEAP program doesn't mean only have the version in advance, but also means to suggest future improvement for our business without do customization. So this is the very important things. We need to avoid as much as possible customization. Ideally, we must have a product evergreen, no code. This is the motto introduced by Microsoft, but as I can imagine that also today is a dream sometime, especially in some country. But again, in my opinion, pushing on ideas portal, pushing on Yammer. So if you sign up a PEAP program, you also have access to Yammer group, so you can iterate with the product group team directly, very, very important. So we can push, we can speed up your cases as a solution, because sometimes on Yammer you can find already some solution for your issue, or sometimes you can have a reply in terms of if you have an issue, sometimes more easy to gain a solution also for other people in the channel, other people, client and expert in the network, then sometime to have a ticket that means a lot of call, something like that. But again, PEAP means a lot of benefit. Again, so we have different version. We have a PEAP availability, so means the preview version that you can start to install in your test environment in order to get in touch with the new feature, the new bug resolution. We have general availability. More or less, general availability is after more or less 1 month ahead the PEAP availability. And then these very important things, the auto update schedule means that you can't, ideally, you can't postpone the update of your system, I mean production system mainly. So it's very important that we take in account this data. We can skip 3 updates per after the current update. So Microsoft allow us to again skip 3 updates, but no more. So we need to take in account that we need to move the first update we have in mind that probably introduce benefit for our business. Inside here we have 2 major updates, spring and fall releases, and the other updates are named minor updates. So minor updates mainly include bug fixing. Major release, so fall and spring releases include also new functionality. So obviously is the update more impacted on my application. Again, one version experience means at the end for task we must be on board. So configure a weekend update for update, configure environment for update, sign up for the first release program, as I said before. The notice monthly, so upcoming notification obviously will be available in lifecycle services. We need to check the release note in order to understand what are the new feature or bug fixing coming. Execute. We have the self-update until obviously production. In production, we have to raise a service request on any cases handled by Microsoft. So we can handle everything until production. Then we need to we have a Microsoft on board in order to schedule the proper slot in terms of update. Finally, we have the validation. Is optional, but in my opinion must be mandatory because it's very important in order to anticipate as much we can potential issue. We know that in F&O especially we can't like 2012 move in production, fix something and close the client and nothing else, but we need a release, we need to fix the something dev, we need to move to the test branch, we need to promote, blah, blah, blah. So it's very time consuming. Not time consuming, but again, we must respect some step and validation, obviously, in a Q&A environment before to move the package in production. So we must be sure that the 90% that the customization and the release doesn't include any regression in our journey. As this is the reason because Microsoft, as you can see later on, introduced some tool like impact analyzer, like data task automation, like RSAT in order to validate as much we can the solution. Well, so impact analyze tool is the first tool, very, very important, that help us to anticipate or at least have a picture in terms of impact of what about a release, an update introduced in our application. So with impact analyze, you have different tab, as you can see below. Is obviously available from LCS. You need to choose the version of the update version that you ideally want to move in your application, and start like analysis. So the very powerful tool is that the system analyze your application, so your customization, comparing with the standard solution coming with the application, with the update story. And as you can see in the usage and chart, you have a very, very, very useful picture because we can have if you can see how much big is the circle means that you have more impact in your application in terms of area, obviously. And if you can see also in horizontal, you have the usage of your system. So for instance, SCM warehouse means that you have a big impact, but there is not too much, interaction with your business. But comparing with the other area like general ledger, like that you have, as you can see here, 70 million of interaction, means that is an area very, very used by the business. So the attention, we need to take attention obviously on the area impacted, the more impacted according to the number of according to the utilization of the area by your business. So it's very, very important KPI. Obviously, is a KPI is something that helps us in order to dedicate as much time as we can on this area. So it's something like an indicator, but it's very useful in my opinion. And below you have agreed that at least for the same the objects or classes table, something like that, for the same with an high usage. So also here you can understand not only obviously the object that have an high usage, but also object that contain a lot of update in this release. So is a cross check between the update including the release and the utilization on your application. Very, very powerful. PEAP program, as discussed before, is contain a lot of benefit. You can check through the insider program. You can sign up again a form, and you after some working day you have the green light to connect to access to the PEAP program. So Yammer, so from LCS you have access to a project named PEAP, so you can find it a lot the update in advance, IDEA portal, something like that. So a lot of benefit. Well, so come back to the journey. This is very, very good picture in my opinion, because recap is a recap of what we handle in the past. So in the past I remember that for my project we are reactive, so means that one per year or every 2 years we decide to, with the client obviously, to move on the new update. So we start the preparation, we start the test, we don't handle code data refresh, or very rare, no testing, or better, and only manual testing. So this is the story. As of today, our journey, must move from left to right. So become more proactive means that the preparation, we need to review what's new, understand feature, and define impact on our implementation, our application. This is very important. As of today, we can, because with the impact analysis, with what new, with other tool, we can do that. Probably in the past it was more difficult. Acceptance test and other environment, we need to handle periodic refresh, enable micro release validation program, something like that. So with the power of LCS, we can, with the services part, we can refresh our data with just a click. So in the past, we need to raise a ticket, engage an infrastructure guy, blah, 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 or create some script in order to handle automatically, but in many cases it was time consuming. So again, we need to have an environment, usually pre-prod or quality environment, that is must be updated very, very soon with data and code, production code. And we can do that with obviously the feature of LCS. One thing important from the on-premise customer, or which have on-premise RSAT is available as well. Impact analyzer, no. So for on-premise on LCS is not available impact analyzer, and obviously is not available the service part. So on-premise means that you can do everything, obviously, but without the powerful of the service part of provided by Microsoft. Update on version on the other environment the same. So keep up to date after Microsoft release. So all environment must have the same release. Update before each release, except at least one environment to support production. So the strategy here is to update environment, but obviously before to update production means that we have our build environment that must be the previous release. We must have our quality environment, so tier 2 app with the previous release in order to validate the package and in order to handle also application maintenance, because you can have a client that obviously is live from a long time. So means that you must handle the project build the project scenario with the application maintenance scenario. Small things, a few words about the build. As of today, you know that we can use pipeline completely in Azure, so we can avoid to have a virtual machine locally or in Azure in order to handle the build. So it's not anymore mandatory. Very important. Okay. Testing again, we start from not testing, but for different reason. Timeline, because the solution allowed us in the past to fix something directly in production. As of today, it's not anymore possible. But also in terms of risk, in terms of impact on the business, we need to avoid. So we need to move on a fully automated testing for process integration. Or in any case, a mix from manually and automatic testing. As you know, the issue today is the integration part. Means that using RSAT, you can test more or less everything in F&O, but you can't test something that is externally, like customer engagement, like a legacy system or something like that. Here, I discuss later, but the roadmap in terms of the Microsoft roadmap, but what I personally test is use RPA or Selenium, as I show later on. So my opinion is use a combination from RSAT and Selenium and UI flow in order to allow and test end-to-end my process, my solution. Okay, before to start the journey to see something on the field, a couple of links. So as you can see for the title, the tool apart RPA, robotic process automation, UI flow that need a license. The other tool are free of charge, is included in the solution. So RSAT, as I mentioned before, Selenium, that is obviously a component mandatory and inside the RSAT for the recording part, is also a component that use F&O for the task recorder. Asset ATL, acceptance test library resources, that and data task automation. Mainly data task automation is very powerful to simulate massive data entry. So you know, and it requires some coding, you know, so RSAT no. So because this is the reason because I'm a fan about RSAT, because at the end we can do everything with RSAT. And finally, impact analysis tool that is again a tool included in the solution in LCS in order to, as I mentioned before, to check the impact of our application, or better, in the of an update in our application. Some improvement in the latest release of RSAT. To be honest, I don't know if this is the latest one, of probably Microsoft release a new one, but in any case, it's very powerful because starting from version 1.220, we can use in the Excel create by RSAT, where is mentioned is the data set. So there is data set, there is setup, there is validation, blah, blah, blah. We can use, you can see the formula Excel formula, so like round, concat, upper, blah, blah, blah. In my opinion, it's very powerful because in my experience, we, in order to avoid to create several derived cases, I sometimes use one Excel, okay, and create a sheet, different sheet in my Excel with the list of customer, list of item, vendor, warehouse, something like that, and on the data set used by RSAT, in some way generate a randomly asset, excuse me, a randomly data set, in order again to avoid different derived cases that in any case introduce manually activity. So also functional guys. So this is the benefit of the RSAT. Obviously, this is the reason because I'm a fan, because I can delegate my colleague functional people to create, analyze the requirement, because obviously this is the role of functional people, and also create the test cases. So that obviously was mandatory for a functional guy at the end of a document. I mean, the FDD, functional document, but in this case, the functional, my colleague, create also the RSAT journey. So we create a sort of library in our implementation, in ongoing to the project, along the project, in order when we start, we move and the client start have the go live and start application maintenance with our team that is dedicated to application maintenance, we share with our team also that library. That library obviously must be updated along the year in terms of especially when there's some update coming. So this is another topic that my colleague and some people ask me is what is the effort in terms of maintenance, not of F&O, but of the library. Well, I don't think it's a big effort, because it's enough to run the test cases. If Microsoft introduce something, add a control or change something, the test case fail, But in this case, it doesn't fail for a business issue, but for a technical issue. In this case, my colleague or the application maintenance team must edit the cases and apply, modify the recording step without to record to handle the whole recording. So it's very important. So modify the single step, sorry, and save again the recording and move to the library. So the library creation is a long journey. It's not something that you create in a couple of days. So along the project is mandatory, again, on top of the functional document to start to create the library, divided by obviously area, production, finance, something like that. You can think also to create a standard library, So for instance, finance, mainly 90% is the same all customers. So you can decide to create a default library for also all area, because again, also sales order, operation part or account receivable again, or production, create a planned order, something like that is standard. And if on a client you create a customization, work order, for instance, you need to modify the recording. But our idea is to create step by step a library that is again like a baseline, and we start with this library in order to record the classic topic test scenario, the business scenario of a manufacturing client or food and beverage or something like that. So this is this is my suggestion, and but again, it requires a lot of time. So just before you start, before you finish, okay. Another important thing is the Max introduced in the marketplace the availability or the possibility to handle the regression tool automatically during the pipeline build. So you can find an option in your workflow, in your diagram, in your process flow, in order to choose RSAT test. It's very powerful because at the end or every night or whatever you run the build, from my experience when I run the build every night, obviously, because there's test cases is time consuming. I run also the test cases. So every morning I receive an email, my project manager or myself obviously receive an email with the outcome of the test. So every day we have a clear picture of the test that fail because probably we introduce new gap, new customization that create an issue on a process that was already tested before without any issue. This is a benefit because in our project, we spend a lot of time to test the same process a lot of time. And this is the reason because it's mandatory to have this tool in place, because my colleague, but also the developer itself, obviously must be a unit test, must done a unit test, but with the RSAT, 90% of the tests are obviously ended automatically, and so we can avoid any mistake or I forget to test something, or we can avoid that my colleague tested the same things a lot of time. Again, in this version, as you can see, this is the standard parameters. So run timeout, because we can have a loop, so we can stop the running in order to avoid that running for a couple of days. We have we can introduce a pause between one step to another. We can check failed test on first validation error. So if we decide to introduce in the parameter a validation error. So if there is some info log that contain a particular string or something like that, we can decide to fail the test. This one is a new feature coming recently in this version. So we can, if we tick on this option, the test fail, just we raise an info log error. So before that, the test fail only for an exception. But with this flag, if our custom or also F&O standard raise an error, but it's not an exception, the test fail. We have other options like use operator for validation, case sensitive validation, obviously for all retail as well, because we can use RSAT not only for F&O itself, but we can use for warehouse management, so the app, mobile app for the warehouse, and for the POS. Other feature coming, 10.09, we can receiveable the task recorder pane. Something seems easy things or not important, but believe me, if you spend a lot of time on test cases, recording is very useful. Recently, we Microsoft become GA 10.012 that introduced the ability to edit parameter directly in the task recorder pane, very useful. As you can see, is recently this feature. Before that, you the effort you spend more effort because you can't edit. You could not edit parameter directly from for the pane. 10.013 that is now in preview, become GA soon. We can also validate if a country is enabled. And also add other additional validation option. This is cool because remember that we can use RSAT also for security journey. So means that we can run our test, use different user with different profile, different role, sorry. So we can test obviously finance area and test also if the user have the proper right, because what's happened, you know, in implementation is that the test fine, you know, have no issue. So the test, the process, the custom works fine, but with admin, right? When we move in production on sorry, quality test, and we handle the UAT session with the user with the proper role, something doesn't work because these users have no the right to access to a specific form, or don't see all information, or don't see a particular field, blah, blah, blah. So RSAT is very important also to test the security. Important things, as I said before, is the combination. So you use the test and hours test using RSAT in combination with the RPA. It's very important for the reason that I said before, because our implementation have a lot of integration. So means that we create something in F&O, start a business event that create a notification to customer engagement, or send notification to another legacy system. This legacy system process the information and come back to with another message to F&O. In this case, how we can handle the end-to-end journey, because some clients say, oh, I have a lot of integration, I can't use RSAT, or I can use but cover 30% of my my processes, because the 70% are integrated process. To be honest, waiting for Microsoft, I already use RSAT with the UI flow and also with the Selenium. So I create Selenium recording and with a small custom, but it is really small. I create like a console, so I record with the RSAT a button that I let me say I raise the Selenium recording. I invoke the Selenium recording or the UI flow recording. So the custom is only needed for raise the integration part, but after that I use Selenium, I use a UI float for the step behind, so any manual activity. In this case, I have one only console because I use DevOps, RSAT, and I'm able to trigger if the test, because I again send a message from customer engagement or from a customer portal, something like that, a web portal. I can trigger the issue, and I can store the exception in my test cases. So I do that again for avoid to use different tool, and at the end the client decide to do manually because it's time consuming, something like that. In this case we are able to use RSAT to control everything, and use Selenium and UI flow for the recording itself. Well, before to discuss about performance, because another topic that I love I like is the how to handle performance test. Also here there is a lot of tool in the market. There is Visual Studio Enterprise. There is a lot of tool. I prefer to use again RSAT for the performance itself, but I explain you later. Okay, jump to the system. Deepak, it's okay? I can continue, right? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Jump to the system.
Yes, there you go. You were sharing the other screen. Now you're good.
Okay. Now I jump to my lab environment. So please, Deepak, is some issue, raise your hand. Okay, so this is F&O, so classic, obviously, on page. I have RSAT that, as you know, is an executable. So you, as of today, you must have usually I use a tier 1 environment, but you can use whatever Azure or on-premise, whatever environment is enough to have a few memory, few CPU, and few space, local disk space in order to install the tool. Parameter for the tool is very easy. You have DevOps URL, because each project, every our project are linked to a DevOps project in order to handle versioning, in order to handle test cases, work item, I mean bug, task, something like that. So it's mandatory as of today have DevOps or Git, up to you, in order to handle your activity. The token, because we need to guarantee our security. Project name, so you need to create in your DevOps a project. In my case, is RSAT, but you can name usually is the name of the customer or the name of the project. And in the configuration, you have the test plan. Usually, you have different test plan. There is different reason behind. Usually is one-to-one with the area, so production, finance, HR, something like that. You can also have different test plan divided by sub-process, so production, manufacturing, planning, production, subcontracting, something like that, you know. So you can decide, up to you, to how many plan you want to use. My opinion, there is no reason behind to or issue to create a lot of test plan or create less test plan. Up to you. To be honest, I prefer to create a test plan linked to each area. You need to move here the host name of your environment, and about SOAP host name, you for the same, but the link is a little bit different. So in case of SOAP name, you need to add SOAP OS, SOAP at the end before .cloud.ix. So it's very important. Otherwise, because there is a calling, you know, an API that is called and is called by SOAP. The admin user, this is my colleague, but we need the admin of your environment. We need a thumbprint again for the security part. Thumbprint is self certificate, so it's enough to press new. A new certificate will be created and automatically will be moved here. You can decide the company, because obviously, because test case is run on a company. So if you have several companies that have different business, because obviously this is the reason, otherwise you can obviously use the main one. So if you have a different company with different business, obviously you need to create different configuration and so different test cases. Working directory and the default browser. To be honest, I use Chrome for different reasons. It's more quick, more fast, sorry. And to be honest, I have less issue than Explorer. Optional is the parameter that I shared before. This is not the latest version, so I don't have the old parameter that I showed you before, but the parameter is in the tab optional. And process, as you can see, you can decide to create a work item when the test finish, okay, and send an email to specific people. So here is by design is the functional people, I mean functional manager, about this area. So if I run the test related to production, I send an email to the lead of production area, IT manager, so the CIO of the client, and obviously the test manager guy that is responsible for all journey, because in each project must have, we must have a test manager in place, because the functional guy created test cases, but we need a team, depend how big is your project, but we must have one or more people dedicated to the test journey, especially if you are fresh, if you are at the beginning. You can save as the configuration for the obvious reason, because if you create different configuration in order to lose the latest or the previous one, you can store configuration with the name, specific name in a folder, for two reasons again. One, because otherwise you lose, because you have several configuration. Two, because you can run the RSAT, so they mean the executable file, programmatically, so without the use of build, but also with normally task scheduler, Windows task scheduler, and so you can schedule before the feature coming recently that I shared before. In my experience, I use this approach in order to test also in parallel. Is very important, because again, I use RSAT also for my performance journey. You can use RSAT, you can run RSAT in background using a shell, and as a parameter, you must specify the configuration. So this is the reason, because we must store the configuration. Okay, so we have test manager, regression test suite, RSAT. We have F&O, we have DevOps, we have everything, we don't have LCS, as you can see, because the Microsoft said create a recording, go to LCS, business process modeler, create the process, the gap, also the process itself. If you don't have gap, it's okay. Attach, upload the recording, press OK, start the sync between LCS to DevOps, and so you automatically we can find the test cases automatically created with the step behind, and the recording attached to the test cases. Very powerful. To be honest, I don't follow the strategy, because sometimes I don't use BPM, sometimes, so I prefer to create my test suite. So I create on DevOps test plan. I can create a new one, but I created this recently, so I choose Microsoft. And here I can create a new test cases. At the end, as you can see, you are on the form where you can create the test cases. So you can create your test. Is enough, obviously, a title, an owner. So you assign the test case on a specific owner. Usually I assign the case depend of the area. So my colleague that are inside the team of the specific area. So you need to specify the area. But after that, I here attach the recording, but not the recording, the CIR, I remember the file, but the XML recording. Because this is the unique reason, is the unique way to avoid, again, to use LCS. So, example, I start my recording. Test 5, a classic example. I try to create a sales order that is more complex. So choose a customer, choose an item. Oh, wow, let me understand. Yeah. Choose an item, define the quantity, choose remember which is the dimension that I need to define. No, it's not T, sorry. No. Forget the item, probably is 01. Could be. No, sorry, I forget to. Let me check because I have an environment that's not properly configured. T0001. Okay. So again, choose the customer. Here you go. Define the site. Go to product, choose the size. Okay, good. Another feature very important about RSAT is that you can validate a specific value. So the test is not only, the outcome is not only I have or not a technical issue, but is also a quality check. So again, not only also a security check in terms of role, but also a quality. Means that, for instance, I can decide to check the availability, I mean the on-end form, and check if my on-order quantity must have 380 value. So I can again right-click on the field, task recorder, validate current value. In this case, as you can see, the RSAT create a new entry, and when I run this test, this value must be 380. Otherwise, the test failed. So probably it's not a good example because usually probably you can check other value in terms of warehouse on a warehouse area, but it's a way to explain you how to use this type of feature. So you can validate if I, for instance, simulate a receivement. When I go to the warehouse on end, I'm expect a value of about blah blah blah. So if not, means that the system calculate, for instance, a receive value that is not correct. So in this case, the test fail, or I'm expect a cost of about blah blah blah. If not, means that the agreement is not pick up in a correct way, and so on. So it's very, very powerful. Stop. As you can see now, as you remember, I don't choose save to PC and then attach to LCS, but save my XML, as you can see. You must, I don't remember, to be honest, because Mike's introduced a modification, but if I remember correctly, the XML the name must be recording. Sorry, already exists. There we go. I know probably in the latest version is not necessary, but I remember something like that. So I have the recording. I jump, close here, go ahead to DevOps, attach. Go to, sorry, download, and choose recording XML. Fine. Save and close. So now, as you can see, I have two tests, test 1, test 3. Test 3 is the latest that I created, ED49. So if I go through RSAT, press load, I find appear obviously the all recording, all test cases, sorry, related to my library. So if you remember, I create, here I choose, sorry, test plan and Microsoft MS. So in this, when you press load, all cases related to Microsoft are downloaded by DevOps. If I choose now, check if my, let's see if it works, because I have Office that is expired. So if I create, choose create and the configuration file, oh, here we go. Hopefully it works. No, so yes, for maybe because again, is Office is expires. Oh wow, works. So if you again press new, generate test execution and parameter, what's up behind? RSAT create a text, an Excel file like this, so you can open it Excel. Excel file, you can see you have the parameter. So you have the test case CD of DevOps, recording name, test user, so it's the user that you want to use for the test. If you leave blank, means that you use admin. Pause, action, if you remember the parameter that we saw below, we saw before, sorry. You have method validation, so here you can decide to check some message, some info log. So if some info log appear, you can put here and the test fail. And a lot of shit, sorry, according the number of table involved on your cases. If you remember, we have says create order because we create an order, says table because we have the either and the lines, you know, so either because probably the size is being modified also in the either. Then we have item number, quantity, again item number, if you remember. I decide to create close again, open again in order to check the right item number and the site. Invent on end, validate on order. So I decide to check if after my test I'm expect this value on my on order field on end form. Okay, so I have Excel file. I have the folder that contain the attachment. So as you can see, the recording and the DLL, because Microsoft at the end create a solution, create a DLL.NET in order to obviously recreate the cases, starting from recording, and log if you have some log. So magically, if I press run, hopefully, ideally, I'm expected the cases, the test started. And the flow, the process will be executed if something if the solution raise an error, or if the validation fail in terms of value of an order. Again, I'm expect that the solution, the test itself will fail, and at the end I will have a report on DevOps that I can download and explain me, show me 100% how many test cases fail. Okay, so very, very, very powerful. If you can see, this is the reason because I use RSAT also for my one bit about performance, because probably we don't have too much time. I create a new field on DevOps in order to record the time, the time spent for each test cases. So when I download my report, I can have also this value, you know, so not only fail or success, but if success, again, we have a time spent for each test cases. So this is very powerful because, well, this is a fail. I don't know if it's no. Probably an issue. Given K was not present in the dictionary, so okay, let me check later on. Anyway, if I go to DevOps, open it, if you can see automatically there is the test cases with the parameter, with the step, very powerful. That the beginning doesn't, if you remember, I only attached the recording. Again, I have the recording, but if I go to test plan, I'm expect, sorry, not here, but execution. Okay, if you can see, we have the outcome. So this is the first my outcome, but this is the second one about test 3 that failed for a reason. Let me check. And here you can create again a chart in order to, for instance, area. You can create very, very fast, you know, the a KPI that highlight the test case fail, but probably I don't count no area. We need to choose. You can see there is duration. That is something that I created. So you can have also again the duration of each test. No, it's okay. I don't know how to choose the execution, the status. I don't remember. Sorry, I have a little bit of confusion. Execution, so outcome. Okay, good. So outcome. No. Again, you can decide to count or to divide the result between fail and obviously and test executing, but I don't remember, to be honest, in this moment how to do that. Doesn't care. So here you can have several test cases. You can create different test cases, or better, the right test cases. So you can choose a test cases and create. So choose an option like this. Create derived test cases. In this case, a new the same. Sorry, the case did remain the same, if I remember correctly. No, sorry, it's just working. In this case, on these derived test cases, you can change the data set. So is let me say a workaround, an option in order to create different test cases and on that, you know, share. So all test cases also share the same recording. So it's very powerful because you don't need to create different recording. So the recording still remain the same. Sorry, a new cases obviously will be created. Sorry, because obviously we need to update the result on DevOps. So a new KZD, a new test cases work item will be created, but both will be used the same recording. Okay, but the main the benefits that you can change data set, so change size. So you can decide to, or item, you can decide to create to run the recording, create a new different search order with different item. You know, this is a strategy. Another strategy is here use a formula, and here create a sheet like product, like item, and pick up different item randomly, avoiding to create the different derived cases. So again, depend of your scenario, you can decide to follow one strategy or another. Well, lastly, about performance, I created on test cases. You can see here, you see test 3_1. I created in my a new field in my in my work in DevOps. Sorry, I don't remember if here in another place. Probably in summary. Okay, duration. So I create a new field here, duration, related to test cases. So when you run the library in terms of cases, I have also the duration in second. So this is very powerful because I can decide to run in parallel different cases, different business scenario, recording the again the duration. And so again, not only have an outcome like green light, so fail, or success or fail, but have also again a KPI in terms of duration. And so spend my time to understand the reason because behind an high second, an high duration, because it's not enough to say that my process work as expected, but obviously need to respect some timeline in terms of duration in order to avoid impact on my business. But you can probably, if Purin and Max want, we can set up another meeting, another webinar in order to explain you how I use RSAT on performance test journey.